Hi, this is Steve Rigolosi, and today's forgotten mystery is The Miniatures Frame by Kenneth Royce. Copyright 1972 by Simon & Schuster. And also you'll notice my crew-cutted self, which I don't like, so it is not a forever haircut, but I guess I'll just have to let it grow out. So, The Miniatures Frame. Those who watch this channel know that I like to talk a little bit about how I came to read the books that I read. And this one I found in a used bookstore, and there were a few things that really appealed to me. The first is that on the back cover, there are blurbs from, get this, Victoria Holt and Niall Marsh. Whoever sees a blurb by either of those two, top of the line writers. One of my maybe little dirty secrets is that I actually grew up reading Victoria Holt, which I know sounds weird for a man, but the house I grew up in, my parents' bookshelves were right outside my bedroom door. And my mother was a huge fan of Victoria Holt, had all her books lined up at basically my eye level. And, one day I just chose, I picked one up and I started reading it and I thought, oh, this is pretty good. And I guess that was the first sort of gothic novel I ever read when I was about 10. And so I then proceeded to read all the other Victoria Holts. And my mother would look at me as if to say, why are you reading this stuff? But I liked it. It was a woman in jeopardy in an exotic location with kind of a suspenseful ending. So, in some ways, Victoria Holt got me started on the road to being an adult reader. And I guess I should be thankful to my mother because I'm sure she put the sexy books way on the top shelf, like, The Happy Hooker. I know she had that one, but that was out of hand's reach. And then Niall Marsh, of course, needs no introduction. She is one of the greats. So I thought, wow, the fact that these two writers would blurb this book, that really means something. Also, it was published by the Inner Sanctum imprint at Simon & Schuster, and they were good. That imprint published a lot of great writers, a lot of really good books. I don't know that that's something that we see nowadays, that there are imprints that are really known for their excellence in the mystery genre, like, the Harper novels of suspense, the Dodd Mead Red Badge books, the Inner Sanctum books. But, between Victoria Holt, Niall Marsh, and Inner Sanctum, I thought, I've got to get this book. It was also $3 for a first edition in pristine condition. And I will admit also that I really love the jacket. It's pretty simple, proof that a cover need not be complicated or complex to be effective. Designed by Lawrence Ratskin, who was a very well-known designer in his day, and who really did one terrific cover after another. So I really respect him as an artist and a cover designer. So even though I had never heard of Kenneth Royce, I thought, this is going to be good. So let me tell you a little bit about the plot. Our hero's name is Spider Scott. And I love that too. I mean, I wish I had a cool name like Spider, right? I mean, Steve, that's kind of boring. But, it might be kind of interesting to have my friends start calling me Spider. I do think that is the name of Pat Benatar's husband. That's the only other Spider I've ever known. So Spider Scott is a former cat burglar in England, or as he's known in the trade, a creeper. And he's reformed or retired, depending how you look at it. And he's asked to be on a British commission for prison reform that's going to be composed of a bunch of people from all different walks of society, trying to figure out how to have uh, a more humane criminal justice system. I mean, so that's a pretty good setup. Um, the plot kicks into gear when Spider realizes that two items, two pieces of art, two miniatures that he stole back in the day have landed in the hands of one of the members of this committee illegally. And he really gets a bug up his ass about trying to, figure out what happened and to get the guy, Peter Thresher, in trouble and so forth. His motivations aren't particularly clear, except that the author needed a plot to hang his characters on. So what I liked about this book, I will say, is that I really think that the author did a nice job of maybe looking into what the life of a cat burglar is like. He seems to have researched the techniques of cat burglars, and that was kind of fun to read about, shimmying up drain pipes and how to defeat, those old-time burglar alarms and cameras, before there was a camera on every street corner and every doorbell in America or the UK. And so Spider speaks that sort of underworld patois with all those great, expressions, underworld expressions. And something that the editor of the book did that I really appreciated is they glossed some of this terminology that, we law-abiding citizens could not be expected to know. And so, there'd be a little asterisk, and then down at the bottom of the page, you'd see, oh, okay, that's what that term means. And that was really helpful, extremely helpful. And I have to say, as an editor myself, I really like that because it improves the reading experience. And I could think of two writers whose books I have had to put down because I could not understand a goddamn thing that anybody was saying. One of them was James McClure, and I tried to read his books, The Caterpillar Cop and Snake. They take place in South Africa, and I was really psyched to read something that takes place in South Africa. But the language is so focused on Afrikaans and South African patois. I couldn't understand what was going on from page to page. Finally, by the time I got to the third chapter, I just said, I don't have time to learn another language. So I put that book down. And there's another author still living, so I won't mention his name, who I had a similar experience with. He writes about the English working class, and again, the language is impenetrable. I just couldn't understand any conversation. It really made me think, have I suddenly become incapable of understanding English? But I thought life's too short, and I put that book down too. So there's no shame in glossing terms that you want your readers to know, and this book did that. Something interesting, it's really not, there's not a lot done with this, but it's mentioned several times that Spider Scott is a person with the XYY chromosome. And back in the day, the early days of psychology, there was this belief that people with the XYY chromosome were natural-born criminals or natural-born liars, and Spider has this syndrome. And so they mention it a few times. I guess it's supposed to justify Spider as a cat burglar. There's really not much done with it, which, from a modern perspective, I guess is the accurate way to do things because, all that stuff has been debunked, as so much of the psychology in books from the 50s, 60s, and 70s and earlier, has been debunked by modern empirical psychology. So I found myself not liking this book that much and running out of patience with it and the author and the lead character. And I'll tell you why. So I think that you can have a sort of an anti-hero, a main character who is a lawbreaker, in this case, a burglar, but still give him a moral code. Think about, let's say Andrew Vox and his characters, right? They're all people who live on the margins of society, and they think nothing of hurting people who are vicious psychopaths and killers, but they would never hurt anybody innocent. And Spider fits in that category. He's not violent. He doesn't want to hurt anybody physically. But for a character like that to work, I think you have to make him really, really good at what he does. You have to give him smarts. You have to make him think one step ahead of the bad guys and, have him come out on top so that you could admire his brilliance or ingenuity or his smarts or his street smarts or whatever. The problem in the miniatures frame is that Spider Scott is a patsy. He is constantly shown up by everybody. He is manipulated. He walks right into traps. He comes close to getting murdered several times because he's done stupid things. I once read a self-help book years ago where the author's thesis was something like, never work against your own self-interests. But that's what Spider does on every page of this book. His motivations don't make any sense. For example, he spent time in prison, not unexpectedly, and he's terrified of going back. He does not want to go back. He has a beautiful and wonderful and loving girlfriend, and he wants to be with her. And yet he keeps making decisions that are going to send him back to prison for life and separate him from the woman he loves. So, if the author had put it down as kind of a compulsion or something that he didn't have any control over, maybe I could have dealt with it a little bit better. But instead of rooting for Spider, I just found myself getting annoyed by him. I also think there's a problem when your supporting cast is stronger than your lead. And there are some really good supporting characters here, one being Spider's girlfriend, the other being a policeman who I guess today we would call him Spider's frenemy. That's a great word, frenemy. Tom Moody, who is a retired policeman. So retired policeman, retired cat burglar, you could imagine them having some good interactions, right? Because they're on opposite sides of the law. Their jobs were to sort of outsmart each other, and now they find themselves on the same committee and they have to work together. So that could have made for a really interesting dynamic. The problem is the frenemy, Tom Moody, is a more interesting character than Spider. He's smarter. He's more well-drawn. And, you find yourself rooting more for him than for the protagonist, which is not the ideal situation. I would also say that for a fairly short book, it's only about 190 pages, it doesn't read quickly. I can't quite put my finger on why. I think it's because I expected it to be a little bit more of a lighthearted romp about this cat burglar squaring off against, an art thief. And instead of it being, tripping along lightly and there being lots of merry chases, it felt kind of labored to me. And so my final verdict is that I didn't particularly enjoy it, and I don't really recommend it. I did a little bit of research. It looks like Royce published, 10 or a dozen novels. I don't think he ever really hit the hit the big time. No one that I've talked to has ever heard of him. But Victoria Holt did, and Niall Marsh did. So, maybe they know something that I don't know. So that is the miniatures frame for you. If you decide to read it and you like it, I'd love to hear opposing opinions. Please feel free to list them below. And in the meantime, I am going to move on to another book that I'm almost sure that I'm going to like. And if I do, I will do a video about it here. Okay, thank you and have a good night.